You can't deny the facts that this team hasn't been successful in major tournaments. And we've seen this shift in energy that's, we have a lot of these experienced players and these younger players, but we're missing the cohesiveness and chemistry we're used to seeing with this U.S. team on the pitch. And there was so much talk about it going into this World Cup. And I think it proved, too, that we weren't the most compatible on the field. And other teams have taken note of that and have that compatibility. And you're seeing that in the results of all of these major teams that are out, including the U.S. And it's a shame because we want to see them win and go so far in this tournament. It feels foreign. I almost couldn't believe that they weren't advancing in the tournament when I was watching the game in the morning. But yeah, it's a bummer. And I know this is also a new generation, and it's kind of wake-up call for this U.S. squad that we need to invest in younger players and build our team out and build our standard from what it used to be. I think we've kept the same level for so long, and that's just been okay because we've always dominated. But it's a big wake-up call. We need to step it up.
It's a huge wake-up call. I like that you use that term for it because the women's game overall has been elevated, and that is clearly evident during this World Cup tournament of all the heavy hitters that have been knocked out and all the underdogs, I'm going to call them, that have moved on and advanced to the round of 16. The United States has always been at the top of the standard, setting the standard, raising the ceiling. Now that the floor is raising up and the bottom of women's soccer is continuing to rise, the United States needs to continue to climb, raise the ceiling, set the standard, and they can't stay status quo. And that's what we saw over the last 4 years under Vlatko Andonovski. They were status quo. They didn't continue to get better, whether that was changing tactics or bringing in new players. That was too little too late right before the World Cup. That change needed to happen immediately after the Tokyo Olympics when they win bronze. That's when you bring in a player like Savannah DeMello, Sam Coffey, get them caps and minutes. That way the transition from the veterans to the younger players is much smoother because they have more time together than 3 days before a World Cup game. We're going to throw you in against Wales and then you'll get 2 World Cup starts. It's not setting the players up for success.
Lisa, that's a perfect point that you're bringing up. The Olympics should have been the wake-up call that we're talking about now. You win bronze. For me, I talked on Morning Footy the other day about how we had that Jill Ellis interview, and she talked about having things set up, the team finalized basically 5 months in advance, and how these decisions were made so late from Vlatko Andonovski. One of the things that we talk about a lot is that there wasn't that cohesion in the team, Darian. You mentioned that. I think that a lot of that comes with you're still fighting for your spot on the team until the very last minute, as opposed to becoming a team. Could you see that being a possibility, Jordan?
It's a possibility, but I'm actually not against Savannah DeMello being on this team. I think she was performing well at the right time.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying that if he had made decisions earlier, could they have been more cohesive come the tournament?
Yeah, I think you would lose out as to players that are in form. And I think Savannah DeMello was a player in form. I don't necessarily think that Megan Rapinoe was a player that was in form. So therefore, should she be on this team? Those are the decisions that I think if you make those too far ahead, you might not be getting the players that can help you and be effective at this time in this tournament. So I think it goes beyond, I agree with you to have like a structure from this team, but I almost feel like the way that this team played was the issue, that they were too structured, that they were too reliant on whatever they were trying to do on the field, which I think that is the question. What was the big tactics from this team? Were they going to be a heavy ball possession team? No. Were they going to be a counter-attacking team? No. Were they going to be a sit and defend? Like, we couldn't quite put the nail on the head as to say, this is the identity of this team, because they weren't good on the ball. They weren't good in transition. And that is the issue, is if you're the head coach of this team, you're trying to bring an identity into this squad. And I don't feel like whatever the identity was fit the players that were there. And you start to see some of this movement and some of the adaptation finally.
The forced rotation with Rose Lavelle having to sit. It was forced rotation, and it worked.
But over the last few years, we have been asking for being adaptable. We rarely saw this team play in a 3-5-2. We rarely saw this team play in a 4-4-2, a 4-3-2, 4-2-3-1. I'm not saying any of those would fit them better, but I do think that there are times where games call for different formations.
Yeah, we need to change.
And it just felt like they were hooked on this, we're going to play a 4-3-3. They did change some things defensively over the last year of how they are going to press, but overall, I think it was just a little too rigid. It just felt rigid.
And really predictable. And something to, I think we needed more rotation. If players are off, which I think Alex Morgan wasn't having the most confident tournament we've seen her in, not in the best form, have her come off the bench as a sub. I think you have less to lose. You have a chip on your shoulder. You're going to come out and want to score some goals. And there wasn't like great decision making. There wasn't this sharpness that we're used to seeing that other teams had, this edge, this bite to their bark. It was just a lot of, we expected you to do this. What are you going to do? And other teams defensively were prepped for it.
Didn't it feel like, too, like there's so much talk about this team being very deep, and then it's almost like the team then gets in. This is how I would feel if I was on the team if no substitutions were being made. You don't trust me to go in this game.
That's exactly what the message you're sending.
And I think that also is a hard place to play from. How am I going to go in the game and be confident that I can be effective when you're not making changes and you don't think that that's the message you're giving? I just think there were moments where this was very mismanaged. And we saw from that game against Sweden that this team can play. We knew that this team could play.
They're talented. We knew that. We knew with the 23 players called in.
I want to talk about that potential mismanagement, but that would take us into a whole about the negativity and potentially what Vlatko's new purpose or what happens with him. But I want to give time for the positive here. The positive spin is that there are a lot of young players that are potentially the future of this team that we should shine a light on, because really, yes, we can talk about the negativity that comes from this and what coaching changes may or may not happen. But let's talk about these players. Darian, I know you want to talk about Emily Fox.
Foxy, if she's watching, you killed this tournament. I thought she was so great. She started off strong and ended stronger. She is a staple for this back line, I believe. I think she was agile, she was quick, she maintained possession of the ball, she handled high pressure situations incredibly well, she was composed. I do want to see her get a little higher up the field and cross some more. I do. I don't think tactically it was helpful, like how they were set up, but I do think she was one of the best players for this U.S. squad through and throughout this tournament for me.
When you talk about best players, you have to talk about Naomi Girma. You have to. Lisa, tell me how she did.
Oh, Naomi Girma had a incredible tournament. She had been the mainstay, solidifying in the back line as the center back. Although Becky Sauerbrunn not able to travel to this World Cup, I had no doubts that Naomi Girma would hold it together. She will be the captain of this United States team moving forward. She will anchor the back line. She was so calm on the ball in moments when the United States had possession and they had no pressure on them defensively. She stayed involved in the game. Her movement off the ball, her creating angles and triangles to be options for the players in front of her, her ability to start the attack for the United States when they needed it. And then defensively, she is such a lockdown defender. She is so humble as well in the way she plays this game that she will be a leader on this side. And she has been a leader throughout this World Cup, taking on the pressures of her opposition.
Unsung hero.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's constantly covering. If you're going to play for the United States, you know you're going to utilize your outside backs. And her ability to cover, and I think I had just a whole list of the times where she covered defensively in the proper moment, winning the ball back. She's just a star, and she has been since the first time I saw her play for Stanford years ago. She's incredible.